when we're wrong, we're just merely miss it. But when we get it, we're usually pretty spectacular. So in a sense, it's kind of like being able to pick up words that are going to end up in the public domain, that is the public consciousness, coming in from what we call the global media stream in advance.
Okay.
We do this
let me ask you to stop right there. I want to back up and revisit where we've been and where we are, so everyone knows. There is software developed by Clif, which Clif and George use to scan how much information, Clif, on the Internet at any given time when you're scanning? What is the potential?
We keep about what we call 90 million or so hits. Each hit would be a read that sweeps in about 2,048 words.
Okay.
And we'll throw away perhaps 200 million because they failed to pass one or more of our heuristics involved.
Are these sweeps pre-programmed to the extent that you enter in keywords that you want your software to search for, or how does it work?
We can do it in one of two modes. As you suggest, we can do it in what we call deterministic mode, where we just give it a list of arbitrary words to go out and locate around. We don't really do that so much anymore because it's a whole lot more fun to do what we call serendipitous mode. And that's this complex process where we've defined context in a near human sense, very much like getting a thesaurus and going crazy with it. And then we set it loose and say, if you find a context on being discussed in an out-of-the-way place, so, for instance, if you go to a garden forum and find somebody discussing astronomy or hyperdimensional physics, follow that. Any links they suggest in there, check and see if it's public domain. That is a forum that anybody can access. If so, sweep and read that for any of these other contexts. Then we just let it go crazy.
A little footnote here, Jeff. When it's running in the seeded mode, where we're giving it context, we might go look at a particular website. For example, if you want to know what the establishment thinking is, you might seed it with something like, say the Council on Foreign Relations website, the words that are used there. And then you go look for those contexts.
Okay, got it.
So basically we could, as George is saying here, we can use the CFR site to go through and pick out the language that is particular to them, and we have I think any genius whatsoever, it was really merely a discovery of mine that it was possible to arbitrarily assign a numeric value representing an emotion and attach it to these words in this big lexicon that was given to me by some buddies over at Oxford. And it was about 300,000 words. It's probably about twice that now because we've added many other languages and a lot of place names. But we attach an emotional parameter to it, and then really what we're doing is we're hunting down emotional kinds of things. So when we were to sweep the CFR site, just as an instance, we can get a read on them and get an emotional tone, if you will, set that tone within our software, then tell the software, see if you can find out if these guys are out monkeying about. In other words, see if you can recognize this tone anywhere.
Give me an
That's
idea
one of the design pattern issues that we get into.
Give me an idea of a tone, George. What kind of a tone would that be? Fear? Paranoia?
That's a real
now there you get into the heavy linguistics, which is Cliff's genius. But the tone would be the powers that be. For example, let's say you wanted to know what the real power ruling elite of America was thinking. You might select a number of websites and find commonalities of tone, and this might be something like councils of economic advisors, Council on Foreign Relations,
think tanks,
Federal Reserve,
think tanks, Cato Institute, whoever. Okay, so you get a flavor linguistically, and then you go out and you look for where that flavor is popping up on the Internet. And where that flavor pops up in strange places, you kind of pay attention to that because it's propagating. There's an emotional something going on there.
Sort of like tracking talking points that are in a Rovian kind of a fashion, where all of a sudden every person of a particular political party is talking about a particular event and using the same 7 sentences and the same 8 keywords in those 7 sentences, as though they've been giving a set of talking points and have to hammer it home, which is basically how the elite are trying to control the transmission of information through their owned press.
And you take a concept, and you can kind of see concepts come and go into vogue in language, Jeff, like outsourcing. I mean, early globalist kind of stuff, there was a lot of context around outsourcing, and now it's sort of fading off because that's no longer a big thrust. It's sort of an accomplished fact.
It is indeed.
And we're now experiencing the reaction, by the way, linguistically, which is sort of a complement to that in the sense of a two's complement in a programming fashion, where we had the rise of what we thought would be a new context for humans changing event, and we forecast that, maybe 3 months in advance, George? We knew it was coming. We knew that things were going to change here in the United States in a big, radical way, but nothing like September 11th, but more at a social order level. And it turned out to be the rise of the quote, immigration issue.
Okay. All right. Now, we're seeking, we're searching, and you send out in your software, what kind of a tool do you have to program in the targets? Do you turn it loose? Do you have pre-programmed?
We have 100,000 seed fora that we use. We have a bank of old used servers and a lot of kludged together bits and pieces of hard disk and RAID arrays and this kind of thing. And we just let it sit there and read the internet and follow link after link after link. We have this 100,000 seed site, but over time it'll probably hit 1.5 million or so sites, some of them repetitiously, some of them once. Depends on the nature of what's there.
Let me explain, Jeff, that when Clif says fora, that means that's the multiple forums that exist on the internet. And the actual mechanical technique is it's a spidering technology. Just like Google or web crawler has these little critters out sniffing the internet, reading it, sending back site index information and keyword searches and so forth. Like if we were to follow the word Rense all over the internet, you'd probably be surprised the places it shows up.
I know I wouldn't.
Okay, fair.
Because I'm in big trouble. So
that's why we like you. So that's the technology in a nutshell. You've got think of it as a Google-like spidering of the internet. That instead of looking for keywords and keyword structures, looks for emotional stuff.
And we trap the emotion by the changes in language, which you and I had discussed, Jeff, the other day. And it's really key that your audience grasp this, I think, that probably almost all humans are psychic to some degree. And the range may extend from consciously psychic to totally unknowing. And it's my guess that most are in the totally unknowing area, but there's a significant number that are probably unknowing, but are actively psychic, and they're kind of like leaking out what they see coming, what they feel coming, in the way they use language week to week to week.
Those are actually the best psychics, if you will, because they're not trying. Their ego is in suspense, so to speak, and they're just using their natural gifts.
Correct. There's no conscious filtering involved. Correct. And so what we found was in my early thinking around with this, when I was trying to discover the emotional parameters that were guiding markets, etc., I discovered that a lot of people were concerned about the sun and strange things happening to the sun and so on. And over the course of this was in 1997, and over the course of the next couple of years, indeed, we saw the sun get some interesting effects building up to its own polar shift. And so I thought, let's follow that trail there. This is a lot more interesting than the stock market, which turned out to be very boring, really, once I got to the point where I knew that there was going to be a crash come. And so I set some limits on my Microsoft and other few stocks I had in order to get out about 2 weeks before. But it led me to think about how language is used, slang, why does it evolve, why do we have different parameters for different words over time, why it's not your papa's language, that kind of thing.
Now, and tying this, George, if I might, tying this into the idea of, again, we can call it involuntary or accidental precognition, whatever. People have a psychic ability. And what George and Clif have discovered is that psychic ability is portrayed and manifested in the way they conduct themselves on the net, in communications, in writing articles, essays, newspapers. It leaks out. It's there. And they have come up with a way. Clif has designed software, and the two of them have figured out a way to scour the net with all of the fora, as you heard, looking for key changes in language, apparently